Muito bom dia a todos, muito obrigada pela vossa presença. Sou Cristina Carvalho da Oráculo e vamos trazer aqui um tema bastante atual, de futuro, mas que já começou, que é o planeamento inteligente em tempos de incerteza. Para isso, contamos com a presença do nosso colega em modo remoto, Jaime Marijuan, diretor de soluções da Oráculo. Muito obrigada, estou aqui disponível para qualquer questão que tenham logo depois da sessão.
Bom dia, everybody. I hope you can hear me all right. And thanks for being with us today. I hope you're having a fantastic day. And, you know, it's been, I hope, a great morning for you. So today I want to talk to you about intelligent business planning for managing uncertainty. And if we look back, you know, the last couple of years or so, you know, when the pandemic came up to our lives, you know, we have gone through a lot of uncertainty. At the beginning, we had to deal with supply shocks, followed by demand spikes. Now we have seen actually quite some rapid growth, but it's also followed with high rates of inflation that haven't seen before in a lot of years. And, you know, we need to deal as well with geopolitical instability. So all this can be summarized, as I said, into one word, which is uncertainty. Now, when talking to companies and customers that we have, you know, typically we get these questions lately, like, for instance, how do I manage uncertainty going forward? Is there a way I can really predict what's going to happen? Can I prevent this type of disruptions? Or if I cannot, how I can be best prepared to deal with those disruptions? And what we see at Oracle is that these kind of situations, these disruptions are not going to be a one-off. Unfortunately, these occurrences are going to happen more often, and you know they're going to have a little bit of higher magnitude. So this makes it very important for organizations nowadays to be prepared, to be flexible, and to be adaptable on every system, on every process, every organization they need to deal with, on how you engage with customers, how you engage with your employees, with your suppliers, your logistics provider. You got to be more flexible and be ready to adapt more. Now, agility and resiliency is very important, as we all know. And if we look at agility in an organization begins with planning. The more prepared an organization is through better planning, the faster that organization can respond to events when they occur. You can see here a couple of statistics that I have selected for you today from Bain & Company. 40% of the executives that got surveyed by Bain & Company say that they lose 40% of their strategic potential value due to breakdowns in their execution. Looking at Oliver White, what Oliver White is saying, 78% of the leadership team do not use IBP to deploy the company's strategy. Now, as I said before, agility or faster execution requires better planning. I also wanted to share with you this benchmark study done a few years back by Supply Chain Digest. So it's very easy to read from left to right. So left is less mature, right is the most mature. So you see here, 22% report having many disconnected individual disjoint plans across the company. 55%, they said they have certain integration, very modest, and only 10% they can say we have an integrated planning capability, but it's pretty much top-down oriented. Only 9% of the respondents say that they have an integrated planning capability that is actually both top and down and bottoms up oriented. Now, I have run this survey myself in a number of webinars that I've been running in the last couple of years, and I can tell you the responses that we are getting are pretty much the same. You know, the majority of the organizations to have a very limited level of maturity in terms of their execution capabilities. So if we look at the 22 plus 55% here, the 77% of the respondents, what we can probably think of when we look at their IT landscape is that their landscape can be characterized by what you see on this particular slide. You see here multiple boxes that they picked different applications that are being used for certain plannings, right? And those, the different colors depict different software vendors. Those planning systems can be integrated or not. Maybe there's a lot of data transfer that is done manually, right? And for any planner or any analyst, that they have to deal with this kind of fragmented landscape of technology makes it very challenging for them to come up with one single version of the truth to the leadership team, right? Challenging to say the least, because it can be looking like this, but very often we find ourselves with organizations that have a system like this, which is actually, multiple spreadsheets that might be connected or not with certain systems to a certain level of extent. And for a planner or any analyst, this is an absolute nightmare to deal with this, right? They need to collect data from different files, not knowing certainly whether they're using the right version control. And, definitely this is something that this is not how it should be, right? I think any planner or analyst should be spending time in this kind of activities, right? If we look at this kind of professionals, I think it's one of the most valued professions within a company, the analysts and the planners. Instead, they should be getting the right data and information from the systems, and they should invest their time in deriving meaningful insights from that data in order to provide the best advice and recommendations to the leadership team. Now, because if that doesn't happen, the consequences can be dire. If you look here on the top left, so as I mentioned before, companies will have to deal with longer planning cycles. The processes are disconnected, and therefore it requires a lot of manual intervention to get those, that planning process functioning. And at the end of the day, it's an efficient use of the resources. But it goes beyond that. If you look at the lower left part, this PwC working capital study is telling us that the net working capital that is being locked in the economy is actually growing or worsening, actually going up into 4.23 trillion in 2018. And I'm sure there are many reasons as to why this is happening. But what is clear is that the current systems landscape that companies are having are hindering these companies to make decisions faster, increasing what we know of business decision latency. If you look at the graph on the right side, business decision latency can be defined in a very simple way. It is the time elapsed from the moment an event happens, that event is detected, the event is filtered, a decision then is made on how to deal with that event or disruption, and finally that decision is implemented successfully. What this is saying is that the longer this time is, the more value is lost of the decision that is being made, right? And this is actually the problem that we are trying to solve. At Oracle, we have implemented a framework called Integrated Business Planning and Execution. And whilst IBP has been there for many years, even decades, 20, 30 years, we all know about IBP. IBPX is unique in a way that it provides a closed loop between planning and execution, therefore helping the companies and the businesses reduce that or eliminate that business latency that I mentioned before. And the framework is comprised in three major blocks. You have the extended IBP, which is actually all planning activity into one single hub, or workforce planning, supply planning, demand planning, forecasting, budgeting, everything put into one hub. Then you have integrated execution, meaning move plans to execution seamlessly without losing value. And finally, having this continuous monitoring of, looking at the events, both inside and externally, and collect that data in order to actually replan, reforecast, or do some demand shaping or demand shifting activities. When you implement, when you leverage new technologies that are available nowadays, like AI, machine learning, algorithms, cloud technologies, you can actually move from an IT landscape that, like the one I showed before, like this one, into something that looks a little bit like this, right? Something that is orchestrated, synchronized. You can have this closed loop that makes you, transmit decisions top down, but also collect the data bottoms up, and eventually have all these layers work in sync, and all the information is shared seamlessly across the different levels. So if we look at it from a different perspective as well, with the IBPX framework, an organization can move the needle, actually. And if you look at the chart here on this slide, Typically, the organizations that we are speaking with, they're very much focused in the S&OP, in the sales and operations, first and foremost, with their eyes and the vision into moving into an integrated business planning kind of capability. With our IBPX framework, actually, they can move beyond and implement that connection between the planning and the execution. Now, to summarize, at the end of the day, it is a single planning hub where you can have all the data, you can have one set of numbers that is shared across the entire organization. You can integrate the planning with the execution and loop that back in order to make faster decisions. You can have near real-time constraint-based planning and risk analysis to come up with different alternative scenarios on how to deal with disruption and uncertainty. You can use artificial intelligence. You can have AI advisors that can help the planners and analysts to come up with better recommendations and advice to the leadership, come up with longer range plannings and simulations, moving off beyond the 3 years to 5 years and beyond. Identify the products that are high margin, those that actually they are performing better in the market, and eventually protect those. Try to focus your campaigns and your activity in actually pushing those further into the market. And as well, you could use IoT data to actually respond to unexpected events. Let's take for an example, with this framework, you could connect your manufacturing systems. And if you, for instance, your systems are detecting a potential breakdown in a production line, that, with IoT, you can actually feed that very quickly to the planning IT and eventually alert the planners and the analysts that something might impact the forecast and therefore might impact the performance of the organization. So at the end, to summarize, it all comes down to one point. Because we don't have a crystal ball nowadays to predict the future, we need to lean on the advanced technologies that we have nowadays. And the technologies have evolved in a way that now we can unite planning and execution to help deal with uncertainty much, much better. And this is really what I wanted to cover with you today. Very short presentation, but I hope that was useful. Muito obrigado.